So if IMAX is so awesome, why there are so few films shot in the format? And what I mean by that is 70mm IMAX has been going for over 50 years, and Chris Nolan's The Odyssey is the first feature film to be shot entirely in 70mm IMAX. No other film prior to that has been shot in that format. I mean, there have been films released in IMAX cinemas, there have been short films that have been shot in IMAX, and there have been films that are partially shot in IMAX. But nobody in all that time has ever made a film fully in IMAX. And why is that? And it's not that audiences don't like IMAX. People are excited about this film. All the marketing is about how it is shot in IMAX, and all the screenings at most of the 70mm IMAX locations are already sold out or selling out. Audiences love IMAX because the quality is brilliant, but filmmakers don't seem to find the format that popular, and I wanted to explore why. So I'm a filmmaker, and I wanted to discuss as why shooting on IMAX is so hard, because it really is. It's a format that works against you. So I personally think that even if The Odyssey is a massive success, even if there'll be a lot of people talking about how, it's an IMAX renaissance and people are going to shoot more and more in this format, I don't think they are. I think Christopher Nolan is an outlier, and I think you have to have a certain type of madness to want to shoot an IMAX, because it is such a difficult format that works against you. So I have the utmost respect for Nolan's achievement on this, but I don't think outside of Chris Nolan or a few other similarly inclined filmmakers, we're going to see a big ton of 70mm IMAX epics. I really don't. I think it's much too hard. And in this video, I wanted to give you a proper deep dive as to the reasons why, like a filmmaker's perspective as to how and why IMAX is spectacularly hard to work with and makes it actually, to be honest, it makes Chris Nolan's achievement all the more impressive. People are actually shocked when you tell them how much it costs to shoot on IMAX. I mean, it's not a secret that the format is expensive, but the reality is often very surprising. Even in the context of Hollywood productions or Hollywood budgets, movies do cost tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, but the raw cost of the IMAX film stock is still surprising. So a 1,000-foot roll of 70mm film stock, or 65mm film stock, that's the one that goes to an IMAX camera, costs about $1,500 US. And that roll of film will last 3 minutes. That's right. So a 3-minute roll of film that can only be used once is about $1,500. And on top of that, you've got lab fees, processing fees, the cost of transporting this film around the world. And even at a rough estimate, I think processing and film stock costs is about $1,000 per minute of film stock that runs through the camera. Like, it could be slightly more, slightly less. We don't know exactly what any production would pay or what discounts they get, but I think it's fair or safe to assume that for every minute we're talking about $800 to $1,000, which starts to add up. And you might go, wow, that seems okay. So we not only have to consider the cost of the film stock, but we also have to consider how much is shot. Now, you might not realize how much footage is shot in a film, but it's actually quite a lot. So most of the footage that has been shot will not be in the movie, and that's for any movie. We shoot much, much, much more than need. So this video, I've done many takes. I've been sat on this sofa for a while. You're going to hopefully see the good bits. And that's the same with every Hollywood movie. There will be different angles. There will be things that didn't quite work. There will be fluff takes. There will be things that are out of focus. There will be things where the boom was in shot. And on a typical Hollywood movie, they have a shooting ratio. So a shooting ratio is the ratio between how long the movie is versus how much footage was shot. Is often about 100 to 1. So that would mean a 2-hour movie would need about 400 hours worth of footage to assemble that movie and have enough material to do a really good job. And when you're shooting on IMAX, then that matters, because if it's costing you $1,000 per minute and you're making a 3-hour movie, then your shooting ratio is going to have a huge impact to your budget. So it's been reported that the Odyssey had a 30 to 5:1 shooting ratio. So that means it's about a 3-hour movie and they shot about 100 hours worth of footage. And that's expensive. So by my rough estimate, I think the film stock and the processing would have cost at least $5 million at a 35-to-1 shooting ratio. If Nolan was shooting at a higher, more Hollywood ratio, that number would balloon up to $10-15 million and really impact the budget. So probably what happened, and this is where the IMAX format impacts what's going on, is they would have had to have shot less. So normally films would shoot more and more stuff, and if you shoot digital, there's no consequences about how much you shoot, because shooting on digital is effectively free. You can shoot to a cheap, affordable SD card, and then if you don't like it, you can delete it, re-record it. There's no cost to try stuff out and be experimental. But on film, you've only got the one go, and every time you shoot, you re-record. You basically have to get a new roll of stock and go again. So the issue with that is, as a filmmaker shooting on IMAX, even on a Hollywood budget, you're going to have to watch your shooting ratio. You're going to have to be careful how much you shoot, because if you start shooting too many things, then that's going to blow your budget in a big way. And where that would impact you is it means that you're not able to be as experimental. You're not going to be able to try as much stuff out. You might have a shot that you're kind of happy with that you have to leave in the film because shooting it again is too risky and too expensive. And looking at the shooting ratio of the Odyssey, the fact that it's much lower than most of the Hollywood movies would indicate that they would have had to be very, very careful about how much they shot. And that would impact the final film. It may be that if they'd shot a bit more, that they could have got slightly better performances or tried stuff out and it discovered stuff in the process. Some filmmakers like the discipline of shooting on a tiny ratio. There is an argument to having a really well-planned film where you know exactly what you shoot, work it out in storyboards very carefully, rehearse it very, very carefully, and shoot exactly that. But then other filmmakers would say, well, then, some actors like lots of takes. Some actors like lots of chance to experiment and explore and discover the thing. And being able to just keep the camera rolling is going to be a much more creative way of working. So neither is right or wrong, but definitely shooting on IMAX is going to create both budgetary limitations and also perhaps creative limitations in terms of how much you shoot. So now we come to the elephant in the room. IMAX cameras are big, heavy, and noisy. And that's absolutely a problem. Throughout the history of cinema, the desire has been to make cameras smaller and lighter. That means they can be placed in more interesting places, they can be mounted on things, they can be moved quickly, they can be attached to actors, they can be used handheld, they can be attached to drones, they can be attached to Steadicams. It opens up. Size impacts what you can do with the camera. The smaller and more mobile it is, the more interesting and creative shots you can do. You make a camera that's big and heavy, you can no longer pick it up. If it takes multiple people to lift it, you can't do handheld camera work. You can't put it on a Steadicam without crushing the operator. You can't put it in interesting places without having to build loads of complicated support equipment. So moving and manipulating a heavy blimped IMAX camera would require heavy duty grip gear. So that means heavy tripods, heavy track and dolly, heavy camera cranes, and it means you can move the camera fluidly. You can get lovely shots, but it's not going to be fast. So putting a camera on a gimbal or a Steadicam, a lightweight camera, means we can work really quickly, run around set, grab shots, and be creative and impulsive. With a heavy camera, it means you need a massive crew to move it around from position to position. And if you've got loads of support equipment associated with the heavy camera, then it's going to really slow down your schedule and slow down your flow. You're not really going to want to experiment, because if it's a big deal to move the camera into that alternate shot, well, you may not have time to do it. So the size of the camera massively impacts the style of the film. So if you look at 1920s silent cinema, you'll notice that a lot of the camera work on the best films, say something like F.W. Murnau's Sunrise, has loads of camera movement, loads of flowing, fluid, excellent creative camera shots. But then in the 30s, when sound became a thing, cameras had to be put away in soundproof booths or in blimps. It became much, much harder to move the camera, and the footage that came out of it just became much more static. We went from the movies to the talkies, and it was, sound was the focus, and it was just talking heads. And so, yeah, so size absolutely is an issue. Now, the way filmmakers like Nolan would get around this issue is by planning very, very carefully. You know, like deciding the shots in advance and having enough equipment and enough crew to move the camera as efficiently as possible. But that's at the cost of spontaneity, and time is money on a film set, so it would limit the shots they could get and also limit the flow on the set. If you had to pause 30, 40 minutes, an hour between shots, maybe even longer, it's not really going to have much flow. The actors aren't really going to get in the zone if they're always waiting on the camera being moved. A good example is Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later. It was shot on mini DV primarily because the cameras are very tiny and lightweight, and he wanted to shoot deserted shots of London, and he only had like short windows that he could close the streets for, like maybe 10 or 15 minutes early in the morning. So if they can only close an area for 10 minutes and they need to get all the shots they possibly can in 10 minutes, they don't need a camera format that slows them down. So they took compromises on the quality. Like mini DV is not a high-end format. The footage did not look very good, but it meant that they could make the film and get the footage quickly and promptly. Now today, IMAX is big and heavy and slow, and although you can work with that, and filmmakers have proved it's possible to do that, I wonder if the filmmakers that have been spoiled by lightweight digital cameras would be prepared to go back to IMAX. Like if you're used to working with a small lightweight camera that allows you to be quick and impulsive, would you go back to the heavy duty super slow approach? Like it's definitely a thing that negatively impacts your creativity, and to get past it you have to be much more rigorous and disciplined in your filmmaking. But anyway, if you have any comments, leave a note in the comments, and it's a good thing to discuss. Does something like IMAX negatively impact the creativity of a film? So the other issue with the IMAX camera only taking 3-minute loads is how that impacts the actors. So actors are human, who knew? And they have good days and bad days, and they'll be in the zone 1 minute, they might not be in the zone the other minute. And if you imagine on a film, it's really, really hard because you have to sort of stretch your concentration over multiple days, over multiple weeks, and try and do a consistent performance of a character, but you're doing it in short little chunks. And the way films resolve that, the way that actors make films or performances that look consistent, is the director has to guide it and do multiple takes and almost like find the performance in the edit. It's very different to the theatre. In the theatre, the actor has full control and can run through the entire play in one go, and the character can go on a proper journey. On a film, you're shooting out of order, and actors have to try and remember what intensity they are at any individual time, and have all the shots shot at different times and different days, different weeks linked together. And that's really, really hard. That's one of the hardest things about making a film, is you're shooting it in lots of little chunks. And that requires incredible concentration. So the problem with an IMAX camera would be, if you've only got a 3-minute camera load, that means you could be having a real hot streak. Your performance could be in a really good place, the actor's really getting somewhere, and then the camera runs out of film, and then it takes up to 20 minutes to reload, and the moment's lost. So it must be incredibly frustrating as an actor that if you're ready to go now, oh no, we've got to wait 20 minutes. And then imagine keeping that level of intensity of performance exactly the same 20, 30 minutes later. That's the real hard thing, because once you've done a performance and time has passed, it's really hard to pitch the level of performance at the right level. And obviously brilliant film actors can do it and do it on film, but IMAX makes it a little bit harder because you've got, it's building in longer weights, and you can't sort of let scenes run. You can't do as much improvisation on camera. You can't sort of do that experimental stuff because A, you're burning stock and it's expensive. And even if the stock wasn't expensive, burning through a 3-minute roll and then having to wait is going to completely diminish your flow. So that's, I think, another reason why fewer filmmakers shoot on IMAX. It's not just all the stuff we've talked about, the cost, the size, the weight, all those things, is it's not a very actor-friendly format. And actually, films mostly, we forget, films are mostly about actors. We overthink about cameras and stuff, but actually, the most important thing on any film is getting a brilliant performance from an actor. And the camera exists to serve the actors, not the actors existing to serve the camera. So, actually, when we overthink about the technology, it's the wrong way around. And if the technology gets in the way of the performance, then it potentially diminishes the film. So the other issue with IMAX film is that it's film. And the industry has moved on from film mostly. There's a few holdouts on film, of course, and people love film, and film has this beautiful look. But actually, there's many, many good reasons why most people work with digital. It's partially to do with cost. Digital is vastly cheaper, but it has loads of other advantages. The main ones are your ability to see the shot in perfect quality as you get it. So you can have a good high quality digital monitor on set and see exactly what the camera sees. So you know exactly if the shot's in focus, you know exactly what level of detail has been recorded. On a film camera, you don't. You don't know what you're going to get until it comes back from the lab. The way a monitor works on a film camera set is if they have monitors, they would just have a little video camera, a video tab it's called, and that's connected to the viewfinder of the film camera, and it gives you kind of a soft, blurry, not very high def image of what the camera sees. So you can get an idea of framing, but it won't give you an idea of like if the shot's in focus or anything else. So digital, you're super confident you've got the shot. You know that you've nailed the exposure. You know that you've nailed the focus. You're not going to have any nasty surprises when the footage gets back to the lab. Also, it's more secure because on a digital camera, we can record multiple copies. We can make backups on set easily. We can upload the footage to the cloud. The footage is very, very safe. And if anything gets damaged or the data gets corrupted, which does happen, we discover it very, very quickly. So, there's lots of advantages to work with digital. Whereas on film, and this is just film in general, you don't know if you've nailed the shot till it comes back from the lab because you may have made an exposure mistake. The footage might have got damaged or scratched in the camera. There might have been an issue with the film stock. There could be all sorts of things that have gone wrong that you won't know about it. And then the thing with IMAX is there's only 2 labs in the world that will process it. So there's one in London and one in LA. So if you're filming anywhere in the world, you've got to courier the footage to the lab. This could take several days. At the whole time it's going to the lab, that footage is at risk because film camera footage is one of a kind footage. If you've shot the perfect shot or the most important scene in your film and it's irreplaceable, that piece of film gets lost in transit or damaged in transit or accidentally x-rayed and it's very delicate, like a roll of exposed film. If somebody were to open that roll would get damaged, light would get in and it would be ruined. So this is very, very precious cargo and it's very, very, very risky moving it around the world. So it has to be transported very carefully at great expense. Whereas with a digital file, we could grab it out of the camera, make a copy on set, start making backups, and it's safe very, very quickly. And most digital cameras will record multiple copies of the file. Like they often have 2 card slots. So you can record a main and a backup, and you could have an external recorder rolling. And then it gets to the lab process it. And then if the lab discovers anything wrong with it, like, oh no, that shot didn't work and you need to reshoot it, you might not know that for 2, 3, 4 days on an IMAX shoot if it's taken several days to get to the lab. And at that point, the set might have been struck, the actor might have had a shave, all sorts of things could have happened. So it massively impacts your schedule. Like the immediacy of digital, of knowing you've got the shot, is a huge kind of comfort and safety blanket. And it allows you to be confident that, okay, we've got that shot, it's perfect, we can move on. Whereas on film, we'd be like, okay, I don't want to risk letting the actor have a shave because maybe he needs to have a shave for a different scene, but he needs the beard previously. And if he lost the beard and that footage was lost, then we're stuck, or anything like that. So any kind of continuity errors that you would worry about, any locations that you would want to move on from, you can't really do that until the until the footage is confirmed as safe. So yeah, So definitely the logistics of film are incredibly hard, and they're particularly hard in IMAX because you won't have a local film lab. Like obviously film has existed for 120 years, and films did cope, but we've basically got used to the luxury of digital, and filmmakers now that use digital a lot would probably find that film quite stressful and constricting. And then IMAX kind of times that 11 because there's only two places you get processed. And it's fine if you're near the lab, if you're shooting in LA and the lab's down the road, or you're shooting in London and the lab's down the road. But if you're shooting in Australia, you're kind of in trouble. It's just going to be vastly harder. And, a lot of sort of film productions are limited geographically because they would have to be in a place where it was easy to get the stock back to the lab. And historically, that has been challenges when people have filmed in remote locations, because you've got the risk of very precious stock that's difficult to store, difficult to look after, and until you've got it back home safe, it's not safe. So yeah, definitely that's another thing that sort of makes not just working with IMAX, but working with film harder. So the challenges of IMAX are not just limited to the film set. There's also post-production to consider, and actually it's still equally complicated having an IMAX film workflow. So most movies are post-produced digitally. That means the footage is either shot digitally with cameras generating digital files, or it's shot on film and those films are scanned to a digital file, and then all of the editing, visual effects, color correction, and final delivery of the film are made by manipulating those digital files and outputting a digital file, typically for digital projection in cinemas. Now, IMAX film presents some problems with that. The first one is that most digital workflows are based around a 4K resolution. So that's 4,000 pixels across by about 2,000 pixels high. And the reason is because 4K is eminently good enough for like most purposes, and cinemas and home screens max out at 4K. There's no reason to post-produce images at higher resolution for movies. The problem with IMAX film is it's incredibly high resolution. It could be 8K, it could be 12K. Film resolution is not the same as digital, but the whole point of IMAX is it's very, very high resolution. So the idea of scanning IMAX film at, say, 12K and then processing it digitally is would be incredibly inordinately expensive. And there aren't easy workflows for that. And then also, if you had this 12K file of your film that had been processed digitally, there isn't a projector to screen it, which is why IMAX film is projected on film. But there's no easy way to get a 12K file back out to film. There are film recorders, there are laser recorders that record digital files back to film, but they max out at about 7, 8K resolution. Like they're kind of limited. So if you post produce this film digitally, you would lose out on all that extra IMAX quality. So basically, you're super limited. So in order to preserve the quality in IMAX film, the way Chris Nolan works is he does what's called a photochemical post-production. And that is simply that the camera negative is edited and then it's printed directly onto print stock. So it's not manipulated electronically, it's not manipulated digitally. And I mean, there's a lot more complexity to that, but that's the simple thing, is that if it's done optically and photochemically, you're preserving as much resolution as possible, and ultimately you're going to get a purer, clearer, better image than converting everything to digital and then converting digital back to film or just projecting digital. But the downsides of that is, and this is where most other filmmakers come in, including myself, is we've kind of got used to digital post-production. Digital post-production allows us to do many things. It allows us to solve mistakes. It allows us to do very complicated color correction. It allows us to do lighting adjustments. It allows us to do composite things and change shots. It allows us to crop shots and resize shots. It allows us to speed things up, and it allows things to slow things down. So we have a lot of power within the digital domain to manipulate images. If you're just cutting the camera negative and then printing it, you don't have any ability to change the image. You can do tiny things. You can print it a little bit lighter or a little bit darker. You can change the color cast slightly by printing it through different colored lights, but you have very limited powers of manipulating the shot. So what that means is you have to shoot the film with perfection. The lighting has to be perfect on the set. The shots have to be perfect on the set. And because any mistakes can't be digitally manipulated or fixed, because there's no tools available to do that. And if you do use digital tools, then you're going to have to scan the film into digital, print it back out to film, and that will work. And there are digital shots in Chris Nolan films, but you have a quality loss for those shots because that digital work will have been done at a lower resolution. And the challenge is for like a lot of filmmakers is we're used to those digital tools. And if we take them away and say, like, we're having a vow of chastity, we're not using anything digital, it's just going to be printed. It means the lighting, camera work, everything has to be perfect on set. We can't solve it. So it's a very, very pure approach to filmmaking, but it's incredibly high risk because if there's a mistake in the shot, you kind of have to leave it because you can't fix it. So it requires incredible technique. It requires incredible contributors and incredible crew in order to achieve perfection. And that's where I would sort of be scared of working in that format, because especially when I'm working on lower budget stuff, like I am working with the skills I have and they're a bit limited, and I might have to fix things in post. Like it's very normal for me to have to, adjust the lighting a little bit in DaVinci and reframe a shot a little bit in post because I didn't quite get it right on set. And I can fix my mistakes and hide my weaknesses. But on Imax, there's absolutely nowhere to hide. It has to be perfect on set because you don't have the ability to change it. And that's where I have utmost respect for Chris Nolan, because even with all those limitations, he went for it anyway. But I think a lot of other filmmakers that are used to the digital tool set would find that workflow very, very difficult. Actually, well, very few filmmakers work photochemically. Most of them work digitally. Even if they shoot on film, they still post-produce it on digital in order to access all the film tools. So, yeah, I think the amount of like big Hollywood directors working photochemically are like, you can count them on one hand. There's Chris Nolan, and I couldn't think of who else, to be honest. But I think the final point to think about is distribution and if it's worth it. So, thing is, if you're shooting on IMAX, you're going to have to jump through all of these hoops. You're going to have to go through incredible expense to shoot in that format. And it's also going to impact the way you make your film. You're definitely going to miss out on tools and abilities and things that you would have on a digital shoot. It would make the shoot much harder to schedule, much more stressful, and it would be a shoot that is much, 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 much harder on your actors. They would have to work in a different way to how they would work on a digital film, and that would absolutely impact their performance. Some people might argue it might make their performances better. There's something about film that focuses the senses or focuses the attention. If you've only got one chance to get it right, then some people argue that makes the performance better. The jeopardy increases it. I'm not fully sure about that, but it's an argument people can make. But then it comes to getting the film out into the world. So the thing is, if you shoot on 70mm IMAX or 65mm as it is in the camera and it's projected on 70mm, you have very limited places it can screen, because if we convert it to digital, and the vast amount of people that watch Chris Nolan's Odyssey are going to be watching a digital version, because 99.9% of cinemas have digital projectors and will be screening a digital file. And to be honest with you, at the point you've taken the lovely super high quality IMAX image and converted it to digital, then it's much the same of any digital image. Like it's not going to preserve the IMAX look to it. Not really. So you're only truly going to see the full power of this 70mm IMAX image in 41 screens worldwide. Now, that's not many. There's not many IMAX screens left, partially because the technology is difficult and expensive, and there's not many films made in the format, so it's a bit of a chicken and egg. Like there's not loads of 70mm cinemas because there's not loads of people shooting in 70mm anymore. But the question is it worth it? And that's my question to you, because it's probably worth it in the sense that if you're watching it and you're an IMAX fan and you're going to like, wow, this is an amazing experience and I'm loving the extra quality, but you're going to be in a minority. Maybe 1 or 2% of the people that view this film will be viewing it in IMAX, because IMAX cinemas are limited. They can only show the film so many times. There's only so many of them, and at a certain duration, they're going to have to start showing other films. They'll have contracts with other studios. So, the BFI IMAX can't show the Odyssey for the next 3 years, even if customers would buy enough tickets. So there's a limit to how many tickets they can sell. They can sell 450 tickets per showing. And in the UK, there's 3 IMAX cinemas. They can show, so there's a limit to how many tickets they can sell per day, and it's a small fraction of the overall audience. So I'm sure Chris Nolan would say it was worth it, but you've got a situation where you've maybe added 10, 15, $20 million to the budget to do the IMAX thing. You've made your life a lot harder, and you've limited some of the things you can do. You've made the post-production more difficult. You've made acting more difficult. You've had a harder experience on set, and you've had to limit how you shoot, because you can't always position the camera the way you would if it was a smaller camera. And the question is, does that make the film better? Because it might make it better for the IMAX viewing public, that 1% viewing it in IMAX, but the negative IMAX things, the negative things that could impact the performances, that could reduce the amount of shots, that could mean that you can't fix shots, all the kind of mistakes that could happen due to it being IMAX are burnt into the film, and all those choices are burnt into the film. The film is what it is because it's made in IMAX, and the IMAX viewers will benefit from the IMAX quality, but the rest of us, if we don't see it in an IMAX, we won't benefit from the IMAX quality. And actually, maybe the film would be a better film had it been shot on digital. Maybe they'd have been able to shoot more takes, go to more locations, do more things, have better visual effects, do other stuff that could have elevated the film. And yes, it wouldn't be as high resolution or as technically as pretty, but the storytelling could be better, the performances could be better, the camera moves could be better. There could be all of these other choices. So it's not black or white or cut dry. And there is no answer to this, and we will never know. But my point is, I think I have huge respect for Nolan for doing this crazy thing. And I feel like it is a crazy thing almost because it's so hard. But I don't think we will see an IMAX renaissance. I don't think other filmmakers or many other filmmakers are going to follow Chris Nolan's path and do the same thing again. I mean, you can disagree, and please argue with me in the comments. I love a good internet argument, but I personally think the good quality of IMAX isn't enough. That's not enough to sort of justify all the pain. I'm sure some of you will disagree, but I know that's my thoughts anyway. Well, thanks for staying to the end. That was a long one. It's my first YouTube video on any topic, but I'm going to be doing more. So please follow, and we'll have some other nerdy film and film technology deep dives as we go. I've been Phil Connolly, and lovely to meet you.